there is no right leadership style. There's just a right leadership style for the situation you are in. An S leader is probably not the best leadership style to be like, if the house is burning, like,
Mhm.
you do not need somebody going, well, you know what we should really do is fireproof. It's like, no, you should get out. So you need D style leaders and you need S style leaders. You need I style leaders that inspire people. And you need the C style leaders that make sure like you do not want your chief accountant, your controller or whatever, to be an I style leader. Oh, let's grandstand. You actually want them to be a C style leader. Like, hey, if you don't dot your I's and cross your T's on this, SEC filing or whatever, you are going to jail. So let's not do that.
Jeff, I'm so excited to have you on. We're kicking off 2026. You've been a great mentor and friend and industry colleague to me from helping me launch this podcast. Essentially, you were one of the earliest episodes to being on your podcast and all the wonderful chats that we've had. You're a wealth of knowledge. You're helping other executives and middle managers and clients, organizations, companies in between. Share with our audience, because I know we've got some new folks tuning in. What's your background and what are you currently working on since you and I last chatted?
Sure. So my background, is mostly marketing, although I did start out my career as a high school physics teacher, which I always say is the toughest marketing job I've ever had. And then I was a marketer at Nabisco. I was a marketer of the Hershey Company. I always like to tell people my kid's favorite title I ever had was when I was the director of Twizzlers and Jolly Ranchers. I worked for the parent company, I guess where you are, the parent company of Food Lion. They have a bunch of banners up in the Northeast. And then I worked at Cracker Barrel as the head of marketing. And I have to nowadays say, not recently. I had nothing to do with that. And once I left that world, sort of moved into the first thing I did was I wrote this book behind me called The Middle Matters, a toolkit for middle managers, which is really like a lot of just learnings that I wished I had had 20 years ago, which is interestingly like one of the most common pieces of feedback I've gotten about the book is like people who a little further along in their career, like this is the book I needed 20 years ago. And and a lot of it is just stories of me screwing stuff up and learning the hard way. And I thought, wouldn't it be helpful if I could help people not have to learn the hard way? And so that's a lot of what I was thinking about when I wrote the book. And so then I started writing articles and doing podcasts. And then I thought, oh, I should do speaking on this. And then I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to do, executive coaching. And so now I do executive coaching. I work with, like, as you said, I work with um, I've worked with small business owners. I've worked with agency teams. I've worked with corporate marketing teams, and I've worked with individuals who are just trying to figure out how to either get unstuck in their career or how to sort of navigate challenges. So that's what I do these days. I think that's, since the last time we talked on your podcast, that's probably been the biggest change is that I've a lot of my focus is on these days is on helping either individuals or individuals within, a number of individuals within the same company.
Well, and I've gotten to experience and benefit from your wisdom, Jeff. You came in and you led my team through a workshop on your book, and they were so engaged that they were the quietest I think they've ever been, writing notes and taking it all in. And I saw a huge improvement just in how they collaborated with each other and started problem solving and taking ownership. It is that book that I wish I had when I first started as a manager, and even before, really, there were moments in my career where I was managing interns, but I wasn't technically their manager, and somebody needed to step up and be a leader, and so your book helps folks who are at that sort of the cusp or on the edge, or even, folks who are already managing. Your work is perfectly aligned with this podcast.
Absolutely.
When we were having a conversation recently, we were talking about DISC, and you were sharing some stories with me just about how DISC can help you, that assessment tool can help you in understanding your leadership style, but it also creates some blind spots too. So we wanted to gather today and talk through it. I'm probably going to do less talking and more listening because I think you shared on the last one. I just want to soak it all up and let our audience enjoy it too. But I know not everybody is coming with the same understanding or knows what DISC is, even though we've had a couple of episodes on it. So, would you give us an overview of the DISC assessment and then how you use it for leaders?
Yeah, so I mean, DISC is an assessment tool that's sort of like, I mean, there's like lots of them, right? There's Myers-Briggs, there's predictive index, there's Colby, there's all these different things. And I actually have a friend that sort of jokingly sometimes calls them corporate astrology, like, Scorpio. So it's a little bit better than that. I mean, what it really is
Yeah.
what it really is, Rebecca, because we are marketers, is what it really is a segmentation tool, right? And essentially what you're doing is you're segmenting people based on their sort of behavioral preferences. And there are essentially four different preferences that the letters spell out DISC. That's why it's called DISC. So D is for dominance, and dominance is like people who are like fast and decisive and results oriented. And they just tell people what to do. Just go do this. These people are great in a crisis, right? The next group I is influencing or influential or whatever. These people are energetic, relational, they're optimistic, they're always trying to inspire people, right? There may not be so like much on the like getting stuff done or whatever, but they're like trying to get people to sort of these are visionaries, whatever. And the D's and the I's that I just talked about tend to be the sort of your extroverts, right? And then on the other side, you've got the S's and the C's. The S stands for stability, I think, or sometimes it's steadiness or whatever. But S is really all about being calm and supportive and consistent, and like how do we actually take all the chaos out of the situation? And it's interesting, you want S's in your business, right? Because at some point you want to get out of the like everything's a fire mode and whatever. And then the last one, C, is the conscientiousness, right? This is or sometimes I've heard it called correctness. It's like the people who are everything has to be right. The I's have to be dotted, the T's have to be crossed. The processes are really important to the C's, and they're really all about like making sure things get done the right way. So basically, the tool basically asks you a bunch of questions and kind of puts you in one of those buckets. And I'm sure we will talk in a moment about situational leadership. I think what's really important is this is sort of like what's your natural tendency, right? And the other thing that I think is important is there's nothing wrong with any of these. They're all just sort of natural styles, and all of these people play their parts. I was once taking a course, and like I was like the only S, and everybody else was like a D or an I or whatever it was. And it was like they were just like S's annoy me. Like that's ridiculous, because like S's are sort of viewed as like these people hate change and they want everything to be steady or whatever. It's like, listen, there's a time and a place for where you want steadiness and not changing or whatever. So anyway, that's kind of so DISC sort of puts people into these buckets. So I don't know where exactly we want to go next, but I think there's a couple of directions that are really interesting to think about with these buckets. Is the first one is how do you get past this idea that there's one right style of leadership?
Right. Yeah.
Because I think there's this natural inclination for people to believe that dominant D style leadership is leadership and all the rest of it is just support function. And I think this podcast episode sort of came out of a story that I told you is a little bit of a parable, right? So I think I should probably tell my grog story. Is I always like to say about DISC and this sort of view that D style people are like the leaders, is that at some point in like ancient history a woolly mammoth was attacking the cave, and I have no idea whether woolly mammoths attack caves or not, but like the woolly mammoth's attacking the cave, and everyone is freaking out. except for Grog. And Grog is like, okay, you get the torch, you get the spear, you get the club. And Grog basically saves the day. They chase the woolly mammoth away, and everybody's fine. And so everybody goes, wow, Grog is amazing. Grog is our leader. And they make Grog the leader. And so Grog's pretty happy about this or whatever. And like a week later, Grog's sitting there going, oh my God, like there's hasn't been a woolly mammoth attack in a week. They're going to not think I'm the leader anymore. And so he basically is starting to panic, and he goes, I need something to like prove my leadership. And so he decides that it's time to invade the next cave, right? Because I got to, in other words, I need to create this crisis, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And you've got, so he's the D leader, and you've got this like S leader, somewhere in there going, if we just built a stone wall around the cave, the woolly mammoth would never get in here. That's what an S leader does. And the S leader says, let's solve this problem so that we don't live in constant chaos. And the D leader, who's really, really good in a crisis, has a tendency to go, let's create more crises so I can prove my leadership. And I don't think they do it on purpose. I think they do it because they just feel more comfortable when they're leading in a crisis. And so I actually wrote this, and the I leaders and the C leaders have their own places as well. But my Grog story is specifically about that sort of D versus S kind of thing. But the reality is there is no right leadership style. There's just a right leadership style for the situation you are in. An S leader is probably not the best leadership style to be like, if the house is burning, like you do not need somebody going, well, what we should really do is fireproof. So it's like, no, you should get out.
yeah,
So that's that like so you need D style leaders, and you need S style leaders, and you need I style leaders that inspire people, and you need the C style leaders that make sure like you do not want your chief accountant, your controller or whatever, to be an I style leader. Oh, let's grandstand. You actually want them to be a C style leader. Like, hey, if you don't dot your I's and cross your T's on this, SEC filing or whatever, you are going to jail. So let's not do that, right? Like you need different leaders, and a good leadership team will have the right mix of these different types of people in all the different roles. But I think the other important thing is that there actually is a right style of leadership, and that is not one of the discs. It's not DI, S, or C. It's situational leadership. And you and I have talked about that idea as well. Situational leadership, in case people don't know what that is refers to this idea that you have to lead in the right way for the task and the person in front of you. So I may have a person that I am trying to lead, and I need them to do something that they don't know how to do. So I'm going to be very directive, D style, right? Whereas I might have somebody else who knows how to do this and just doesn't feel very confident. And so what I need to do is support them. That's a very S style thing to do, right? So this idea that there's a right style of leadership that is always the right thing to do all the time is never true. It is always true that leadership has to change. And the real problems that we run into are when people overuse a specific style. And
yeah.
then you sort of get into these sort of, you mentioned blind spots before.
Yeah, and that's where the great leader could also have a bad boss moment when they're trying to force a particular style or what they feel is the right style or their particular leadership style on an individual or group, and it's not aligning and it's not helping the person or the company progress.
Right.
Uh, yeah, I you know I wonder I feel like it takes an extra level of awareness too, because not only do you have to be aware of yourself and what your default is, but you have to be aware of the other person and how they like to not necessarily just their disc assessment, but how they receive information, how you're delivering it to them. Ultimately, I feel like communication is always at the core of everything we do as
Yes.
leaders, but awareness and having the awareness is important so that you know the kind of changes that you need to make and the kind of situation that you're also entering too. I have team members that I have to remember to switch my style of leadership for them. It's not, I think maybe I could see other leaders, Jeff, feeling that it because it's not their default, that it's inauthentic to who they are, without understanding that we're meeting the person that we're leading where they're at with what they need. And so I also see it as a kind of servant leadership too, where you're helping to serve that other person by approaching this situation with a different style of leadership. I don't know if I just overcomplicated that with too many words.
I think that's right. I think there's this idea that you have to really change your view of what a leader is, right? I think that the actually fascinating thing, I'm gonna get the numbers not quite right, but they're approximately right. Only 10% of the population has a natural D style leadership.
Wow.
I just read this yesterday. Now it was on ChatGPT because it could be wrong, but I know it's about right. Is 60 to 70% of the population is either an I or an S.
Wow.
Right? People
Okay.
are more on that people side, right? And basically, like, people side, sort of action or fact side, right? Whatever, and then you've got, like, extrovert, introvert. So I's are sort of the extroverted version of people, focused people, and the S's are kind of the introverted focus of, people-focused people, or whatever. I'm oversimplifying greatly, but the fact is that only 10% of people have a natural D style leadership style. And this is fascinating to me because I have met so many people in my career who have told me this story. They're like, either they were told, I know one person said, I kept people, actually multiple videos, people told me I need to be more of a bulldog. People told me I need to yell at my people more. People told me I was too nice to my people. And there's always a story where they go, "Yeah, but my team gets results." And they're like, "Yeah, I know, but you need to be more, you need to be more mean to your people, whatever." And it's like, "No, you actually don't need to be more mean to your." But it's interesting. So think about that world in which Grog is the leader, right? We're gonna go back to our cave guy. Grog is the leader. And Grog has this dominant D style. He tells people what to do. So who does Grog tap to be his successor? Well, he's going to tap somebody who's just like him, right?
Yeah.
Those D dominant, kind of leaders believe that they're, to your point, like, they believe that their style is right and that everybody else's style is wrong, or is. I actually had somebody once where I said I was an S style and she was a D style, and she goes, "I love having S's on my team." And I was like, I just wanted to, like, flip off the screen or something. Like, what are you, like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
but think about the world in which 10% of the people are defining leadership as their style, and they're the ones that are most likely to, like, take charge in a room because they're the ones that are sort of the most likely to be like, no, my way is the right way, right? And so everybody else is like, fine, I don't feel like dealing with this. I'm just going to do what Grog says, right? And so that Grog defines what leadership is. He keeps promoting people that are D style leaders. And so what happens is eventually is that, let's say you're an S style leader, like me, right? I'm an S style leader. If you're an S style leader and you're trying to get ahead in the corporate environment, what do you have to do? Well, you have to demonstrate D style leadership, not learn how to use D style when you're supposed to use D style. That's a different issue, right? But to demonstrate and act like you're a D style leader. And I am convinced that that is one of the forms of imposter syndrome. Like,
Yeah.
if you find yourself, like, basically trying to fake being this leadership style that's going to get you ahead for years and years and years of your career, eventually you will burn out
Yeah.
because you are having to repeat a behavior over and over again where you that is just not natural to you. And so it's exhausting. It takes a lot of energy. Anyway, that's my answer to your question is I think that we're gonna have to at some point, if we want leaders to be great, we have to normalize the idea that everyone has to learn all the styles, and that we also recognize that people do have a natural style, and that may sort of determine kind of what roles they are going in, but we need to stop assuming that D style leadership is the right style of leadership. And interestingly, I mean, we probably not, I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit hole and, whatever, but interestingly, you can imagine there's some gender issues that go on here, because there are, even though I don't think there's any gender differential in terms of what percentage of people are D style or S style or whatever, but we have different expectations about what men are like and what women are like. And so that all plays into it as well. But the reality is, it's not that there are necessarily more women who are S style leaders and more men who are D style leaders. It's that we basically tell all the S style men that they're not leadership material. We tell all the D style women that they are leadership material, but there's only like 10% of the people out there that fit that bill.
Actually, yeah, or we're attributing to I'm sure that there's a bias in the reverse as well that, because I'm not I don't want to indicate or intimate that a D style leader is a bad boss. The point that you're making that we're also agreeing on too is that everybody can fall within that segment on the DISC assessment. And there can also be a high you can be a high letter and a low letter, right? Because I
Yeah.
think I scored as a high C, and then it actually, the assessment showed me the different levels across all the 4 quadrants. So we can be a makeup of all 4. I happen to be a high C, and then I think next was an S, and then next was a D, very low I, and some of it I think we can exercise and strengthen different aspects. I like things to be orderly and a certain way. I also work in industries where you have to be quick and agile, so I strengthen those components to my personality, my adaptability, and so neither of those are bad to our point, like, in an individual, neither of those are bad, and then as a leader, that's gonna probably indicate what your default leadership is, but to your point, which I absolutely see and agree with, there needs to be a flexibility and agility in how you're leading different kinds of people, and that connects to how they fall on the DISC assessment too. Um, and I'm sure that there are C's like myself out there, or S's, or I's, or any of those combinations that might look at a D leader and say, well, they're too aggressive, or they're shouting at me and they're not actually shouting, and not picking up on the type of leadership there. And that's where, again, that awareness factor I think comes into play. And whether we're leading people or leading just ourselves, having an awareness for the type of personalities and the default that people will gravitate towards is really important, because I also think it helps teams understand how to collaborate and work together too. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, 100%. Well, I mean, certainly when you are working in a team, that, having the right mix of people, right? Again, back to my accountant example, like, you don't want you don't want your CPA to be like, "Oh, I don't know what looks best. What number would be inspiring?" Whatever.
Well, and I'm in operations and marketing, so, my quadrants make sense for me and
Yes,
for you, and I think there is something to be said for aligning the kind of work that you're doing with your segment, your quadrant, your personality. And you mentioned earlier there are a lot of different personality assessments. At the end of the day, we don't want I personally don't want to ever discount or limit someone based on a score that they've gotten. But the DISC assessment, I think, helps kind of break down the complexity and the contradictions of a human, and rationalize it for us. Because from my understanding, humans aren't rational. We're not rational creatures, but we rationalize.
yes.
So a DISC assessment helps us rationalize that communication and that working style too.
Well, I think it also, I mean, again, it's a segmentation, and like all segmentations, they're only sort of good. And like at some point they fall apart because everybody is different and everybody is an individual. But it gives you sort of a baseline to start from, right? Like if I am an S leader, I'm going to find people basically like I had a boss at one point who literally would come into a meeting. This is a marketing role. We bring in all the, creative, and she would just rip all of it apart, and she would basically tell the team, "This is terrible, you need to redo it," or whatever, and I'm sitting there as an S person who's, like, mostly focused on, like, how do people feel, and, like, is this, do people feel like the rug just got pulled out from under them, like, and I was getting very like, I would get very defensive because I felt like I needed to defend my team from this person.
Mhm.
And I now understand because I just, have more experience and whatever. I now understand that like she didn't see it that way, right? She didn't mean any of the stuff that I was taking personally. She didn't mean it any of it personally. Like her view was just like I remember I once said to her, this is a total S thing to do, or maybe a C thing to do. I don't know, but I was like, what we need to do is give the team templates to work from so that they start to get closer to the right thing. And she goes, they don't need templates. They just need to do their job, which is a
Ooh,
very E thing to say, right? But, and you and I are sitting like, oh my God, why would somebody say that? And a D, and all the D's in our audience are like, yeah, like, it's so annoying that people just don't do like just do your job. Like why do all these, you know, why all this personal stuff have to get pulled into this when people could just get the work done, right? Because D's are all just about like, let's just get it done. And there is a real value to that. But if you don't realize that the person you're dealing with thinks that way and you think they think like you're sitting there thinking, gosh, this person's really, really mean to my people.
yeah.
And you get angry at them because you're like, wow, this is a violation of something that I think I hold as a core value, which is we treat people well. And my, my belief is you treat people well, you train people well, and you will eventually get the results that you want. And her view was like, nope, just give me the results that I want now. And what I didn't realize at the time was she saw me saying, let's have a template, and what she's like, this is the slow boat, right? Like it's going to take us forever to get where I need us to get to now. You're saying let's take the next 3 months and get people to like first use the template and then make the template right and then fix all the pieces and blah blah blah. And she's like, this is going to take forever, I need it right now. But what was interesting from my perspective is I'm looking and going like, your approach of just telling people, nope, this is wrong, do it right, actually is not getting the right result. You just keep getting the bad result and we're not making any progress. And so it's just an interesting thing is like really what needed to happen in that situation was for both of us to moderate our positions and going, I understand that why me going, I understand to that boss, I understand why you're like, we need to get this done. We do need to get this done. I agree with you. And I believe that the fastest way to get where we need to get to is doing this.
Mhm.
Her going, oh, I understand that you are trying to make this better and that your view of how to do this is doing it this way. Let's give it a try or whatever.
Is or if you can align on what the outcome is and what that goal is, then I think we can have a better understanding and alignment together, and that is a practice that it can be challenging, but I think every leader needs to start putting themselves in the other person's shoes and trying to understand from that point of view what they're after, and I think we'll get a lot more agreement and alignment, but
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, what are your thoughts?
No, I think, I mean, there's a couple topics that are near and dear to my heart in what you just said. I mean, the first number one is the perspective idea that you were just saying. Like, the key to almost everything in dealing with other human beings is being able to put yourself in their perspective and understand why they're doing what they're doing. In fact, it's this funny, like when I because there are a lot of people who are like, "My boss is a micromanager," like, it just seems to be very common, and the first thing when somebody says, "My boss is a micromanager, I need help," the very first thing I always say to them is, "Do you know why your boss micromanages?" Because if you don't know why, your reaction to their micromanaging is going to make the situation worse. Right? I like to use the word prompt because that's the word that's in vogue with AI these days. I always say to people, we are the original generative pre-trained transformers, like human GPT, right? And so if you don't understand why the person is behaving the way they are behaving, you will prompt them badly.
Mhm.
And their bad reaction to your bad prompt will be a bad prompt back to you, and things will just get out of hand, bad, right?
Yeah.
So I think this idea of like how do you get into people's perspective is really important. I think the second point that you were starting to get at was this idea that we've talked about before about how do you move out of the realm of assumptions and expectations and into the realm of agreements. Like you and I don't have to see eye to eye if we have an agreement. We only have to see eye to eye if we have expectations of each other. If you and I have an agreement that says, I'm going to get this thing to you by Friday. And you're like, and I will not bother you until Friday as long as you promise that you will get it to me on Friday. And if you don't get it to me on Friday, the consequences are that next time I'm going to be all in your stuff, whatever it is, whatever. We don't have, like, if that's the agreement that we have, we don't have to worry about whether you're a D leader, an S leader, whatever. Like, we just
Yeah.
agree to it. Like, I agree, whatever. And, there's this great audio clip, from a well-known coach named, Steve Chandler about, this idea of expectations and agreements, and he says, like, when we have expectations of each other, we just end up feeling resentful and annoyed. Like, we don't like people to expect things us of us, but when we have agreements with each other, we, as human beings, actually like to meet the agreements that we've made.
Yeah.
We want to deliver on the thing that we agreed to. We don't want to do the thing that's expected of us. So the more you can create these expectations, and so I think that's, when you have leaders of different styles, for example, it's often really helpful if you can just, like a boss with one style and a like my boss had and I had, like a boss with one style and a direct report with a different style is agree how you're going to work. Don't just 'Cause, I mean, that was the real problem between me and this boss was I was expecting her to behave one way, and she was expecting me and the team to behave a different way. That was the source of all the problem, right? If we had just agreed, like, this is maybe it wouldn't have been what I liked, but if I had agreed to it, I would have done it. So I think I don't know, that's my take on those thoughts. I think those are really powerful concepts, perspective and agreements.
Well, yeah, we could go down a whole rabbit hole with that too, Jeff, because, that might be one of the origins that expectations and assumptions that can cause the consternation and strife between the different types of people and leaders working together too, if you don't have that agreement. Because I would love to get into a little bit of blind spots that everybody might have, but I think blind spots must be connected to also perspective, right? Because if you're so narrow-minded in your own way of viewing things and seeing things, then it can be very hard to put yourself in another person's perspective and shoes. And then it's also going to create some additional problems and that trickle down for the rest of the team. So I'm curious, are there different blind spots that you've seen each letter of disc have and how we might avoid them if we fall into depending on which quadrant we fall into.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the obvious one is the dominant people are so focused on moving fast that the blind spot is they don't see when they're steamrolling, they're being impatient, they're not listening and therefore not hearing somebody going, this isn't gonna work because, and they just view those people who are saying this isn't gonna work because as being annoying, or why are why are you getting in the way of us moving forward or whatever. And the problem with that is, you see it all the time. Projects that just got moved forward and then completely spectacularly destroyed. I mean, we were talking about Cracker Barrel, like, I bet you anything that's what happened with that logo. Somebody moved this forward when it shouldn't have been moved forward, and that was probably a D behavior, somebody going, "This, we just need to move on this," right? And that's the steamrolling thing where stuff gets missed. The eyes are like, these are the people who are, the influencers or whatever. These are the people who are like, they're on stage, they're inspiring people, they're visionary or whatever, and so what gets missed is the details, right? Like, the danger is, 100% inspiration and vapor behind it is like, it doesn't work, right? And so you sometimes see this. I mean, I remember this spectacular failure of a project at one point where this guy literally like rolled out this huge big rollout of this platform and whatever, and he had little cartoon characters that some agency had created, and it's like he rolled out the platform and there was no data in like there was no data on the website. Like it was just cartoon characters. It was like, wow, this, no, like that doesn't work. The people on the S side of things who are like, this is that steadiness, supportive, like I want people to be considered whatever. And the thing is that they are slow, right? They avoid conflict. They want people to feel good. They want to bring everybody along. And so sometimes their blind spot is like, hey, maybe we may need to actually just push this through, because if we just listen to everybody and try to get everybody on board, it's never going to happen, and we need it to happen. And once it happens, everybody will see that this was the right thing to do. But if we don't move it forward, and so there's that balance, right? That S versus D, like the D is moving too fast, the S is moving too slow. Like, how do you create that balance between those? And then the C people, the conscientious people, these are like, C people tend to end up in, you said you were C part, like operations,
Yeah.
tech jobs, a lot of data, data analysts, whatever, like everything needs to be set up right, computer programmers, like people where like getting things right is really, really important. And, the problem with them is just overthinking and perfectionism. It's sort of the opposite of what I was just describing on the I side. The I side is like, we'll figure it out. Like, here's the cartoon characters. And the C side is like, nope, we need all the data, everything, all the I's dotted, T's crossed before we can move at all. So when you meet people who have that sort of perfectionist streak, they're often in that sort of C kind of, world.
Yeah.
Those are the blind spots.
That is my world, and from experience, I don't know how you've approached it from your perspective and quadrant, if you will, but for me, it's knowing that I'm a recovering perfectionist, not a perfectionist, and mitigating, it's about mitigating the blind spot. And to your point earlier, not criticizing myself for being a C versus not being an I or an S or a D, and knowing when I need to tap in to the other quadrants given the situation, which was your main point in our conversation earlier, and then sort of tying it into expectation and assumption. I think the more that we learn about other people and we realize about ourselves too, the more you can kind of temper your expectations. And I was kind of reminded of this recently. I throughout my life, I'd been reminded by my parents to have high hopes and low expectations. You can keep your standards, your standards for yourself high, but when it comes to other people, expectations don't go very far. And I caught myself having higher expectations for team members. And I came to a realization after observing some patterns and behavior that, oh, I'm expecting them to operate at a different level. And it doesn't matter what I've told them and shared or trained them on or how long they've been there. They are not coming from what realized was a project management point of view. They were coming from a very task oriented, solutioneer, still very good point of view. And we weren't aligned on the directive and the insight that I needed. And it took that realization to remind myself too, expectations, I've got to lower them, and I have to make sure that I'm also seeing from their point of view. And so see where it's all connected and it ties together. And that's why I also, share in the beginning, any of us could fall into that trap of missing something about our people or missing something about ourselves, which might put us in a bad situation if we're not taking the time to realize it and to adjust.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about this, sort of like this foundational idea that I use in like all the coaching that I do. And that is, I look for should. The word should is like the trigger for all of this stuff. Like you were talking about, perfectionism, where like I should, I shouldn't have to, I should have, whatever it is. All of that stuff of all those shoulds are all like, it's whenever you hear yourself saying should about yourself, you need to sort of step back and be like, no, you are who you are. There is nothing wrong with you. But if you want to move forward, you have to accept that you are who you are, not try to be somebody that you aren't, right? So I care about, being perfect because I'm a disc C or whatever it is. Well, great. So how do I become a perfect learner instead of a perfect doer, right? Like, or a perfect achiever, right? Like, a perfect learner would fail some of the time because that's how you learn, right? Whereas a perfect achiever never fails, right? So you have to, it's not that I'm not going to be a perfectionist anymore. I just have to co opt my perfectionism into being like, what am I going to be great at? I'm going to be perfect at being a learner, not perfect at being an achiever, right? And then the other part of that is the flip side of that is, what you were talking about, say, with your team or whatever is all of those expectations, like, really boil down to, like, my team should, people should, the world should do X, Y, and Z, and this is where we sort of fall into, like, this kind of victimization trap of, like, "Why is everybody doing this to me? Why are my people not doing what they should do?" Well, newsflash, nobody else does what they should, they only do what they do, right?
My goodness, yes. Well, I always love your perspective, Jeff. It's so valuable, and that's exactly that realization was such a great reminder for me because I take that idea that should is a nebulous word and it can get us into a lot of trouble because we can't have the expectation that people are going to should whatever that, insert task the way that we expect them to or the way that we think it should go. And that is definitely a blind spot for C's. I've seen in other C's because it's like, well, I put out the SOP or I gave them instructions. They should have followed it. I think we might have had this conversation before, and it's been about a year of me saying to folks, like, well, should is a nebulous word. Just because people have the instructions doesn't mean they understand them or they heard you or they felt confident. And yeah, so I'm glad you bring it back to that perspective too, because that's also where I see expectations and what is possible or realistic can fall by the wayside.
Absolutely, and, it's so interesting, I think people get into that that should mode so easily, and I think, each of the different disc letters probably do shoulds in a different way, right? Like, the D folks are like, people should just do their job, right? That's the D flaw, right? The I folks is people should just follow me, right?
Yeah.
The S is like, people should be nice to each other, right? And the C's are like, people should just do it the right way, right? And it is so funny because it's like, this is one of my favorite things when people will say, "Well, I put it in the email." And I'm like, "Really? Like, how many shoulds are there, right? Like, people should read the email, they should understand every word of the email, and then they should do everything that I said in my email." It's like, nope, nobody. Nobody did any of that stuff, right? And so you have to get past this belief that other people should do stuff and deal with the fact that they are, again, they do what they do. And so your job is to figure out, actually, it's funny a lot, I'll go back to the idea of prompting that I mentioned before is your job is to figure out how to prompt people who don't do what they should to get them to do what they do and have that thing be the thing you wanted them to do in the first place. How do I get people to behave the way I want when I can't get them to do anything? And so it's like change the way you prompt them, right? So, back to like my manager shouldn't micromanage me. Like going back to the question, like why do micromanagers micromanage? They micromanage because they're insecure. They're worried that they're going to look bad in front of their boss. That's 90% of the time, maybe the 100% of the time, they're worried about how they're going to look. They're worried about whether the work's going to be good enough or whatever. So if you want your boss to stop micromanaging you, you are going to have to demonstrate to them that you basically understand the details to a level that might annoy, anyone or whatever. And so so and until you accept that the way to do that is to basically lean into their micromanagement and get them to be like, "Oh, this person really knows their stuff," what you will do is you will fight against their micromanagement, and fighting against their micromanagement actually makes the situation worse, right? Like I'll do the maybe extreme case of like your boss micromanages you, you roll your eyes. Basically what you just told your boss is, I don't think that this thing that you clearly think is so important that you're micromanaging me on it is important. And so their reaction to that is, well, if I just let Jeff do this, he's never going to get it done right. So I guess I better keep micromanaging, right? We reinforce the bad behavior by our natural reactions to these bad behaviors because we're like, this person shouldn't do this. This is like, again, it boils down to this question of they shouldn't do it, but they do. It doesn't matter what people should do. It's what do they do, and what do you need to do to create the conditions where they behave the way you want them to.
It just solidifies to me how, leadership is people and relationships, and drawing the conclusion, if we haven't ever emphasized it in an episode before, that we're all human and we're all fallible and flawed, and nobody's ever going to do anything perfectly. But how easy it is at the same time to get caught up in the shoulds and the assumptions and the expectations, especially when we're seeing something from a very narrow minded point of view. However, there's hope. There's hope with great people like yourself, Jeff, who are demonstrating great leadership and helping others see it and reflect back what that great leadership can be. So, I'm curious. I have a little bit of a lightning round, which I haven't done on this podcast yet. If you had to pick any segment from DISC, what do you think is the most misunderstood DISC letter quadrant?
This may be self-serving. I think S is the most misunderstood because people believe that S's are weak
Yeah.
and care about people and that they don't get things done or whatever. And I just don't think not in my experience, it's not true. Again, like you can keep chasing off the woolly mammoth or you could build a wall, right? That, the S is not, they're not being weak. They're just being like, why do we keep doing this? There's no weakness there, and I don't think any of the disc groups are weak, but I do think there is this tendency to look at it. So anyway, that may be my bias because I just, I feel misunderstood.
I can absolutely see that though. I can totally see that. And something we should all be aware of if we're not an S, to be mindful of with our burgeoning leaders and middle managers who are aiming for that next level, not to put them in pigeonhole them. Is there been leadership advice that you've heard over the years that is just it's aged poorly, it's bad, it should no longer be in the cycle of advice?
Yeah, maybe it's what I mentioned before, the one where like you need to be mean to your people like that. It's just it's not true. In fact, what I would say is sometimes you have to be, and this is sort of in the post like Kim Scott radical candor era or whatever, like and where she's said this is like it's not mean if you're being clear, right? Like you have to like how do you define what mean is, right? And so mean isn't being like you can be sort of direct with someone and still be being very nice, right? Like, "Hey, I'm trying to help you get ahead," and whatever, and I believe that as long as you always put things in that sort of context of what I'm doing to help you,
Yeah.
not I'm not doing it to help me, and then you can be direct without being mean. So I don't know. I don't think you ever honestly, I don't think we should be mean to our people.
I don't think so either, but I appreciate you qualifying that because people who are on the receiving end of their leadership being direct and practicing that radical candor could perceive it to be mean when it's not self-serving, it's to serve that person who needs to hear something that might be difficult. So I appreciate you sharing that and qualifying that. What's the number one thing that you think a new manager should learn first and foremost?
So many options, but I think a new manager of people, I think the most important, well, I think there are 2 things. One, and I'll plug my book for a second, like, in my book, I talk about this idea that a manager, a middle management person has 3 distinct roles: doer, leader, and influencer. And I believe that that's like, if they don't understand that, people basically try to be like doers on steroids, like they try to do through other people. And I think that's probably the thing that gets people in most trouble. But I'm going to give a sort of a runner up to that is, I think the thing that people don't understand about leadership is that the goal of your leadership is to create the conditions where you trust your team to function at a high level, even when you're not there. Words, the goal of leadership is not to do through other people, but to get them to the point where they can do it even when you're not around. And that once you understand that, you will start behaving differently towards your team because you will recognize that your job is now to create those conditions, not to do the work.
What is it about a great leader that to you stands out immediately?
I think that great leaders are able to, going back to that point about perspective, they're able to put themselves in the shoes of the other people around them. And what that often looks like is curiosity.
Mm.
Like, if you say something and I'm the boss and you're the direct report and you say something and I'm like, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Do I say out loud, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard? Or I just say, help me understand why you think that's a good idea. And that humility to say, I need to understand this person's perspective. I might need to understand because I need to help them evolve their perspective. I might need to understand because maybe there's something I don't realize or that I'm missing. But if I don't ask and have that humility, maybe that's the real answer to your question. Like, I don't have that humility to ask and be curious, then I will never know. And if I don't know, I'm going to potentially miss something really important.
Oh, that's a great one. Last one, Jeff, what's a leadership philosophy, could be a habit that you personally rely on?
And go, wait a second, people don't do that. People don't do what they should. Like the ability to kind of recognize when you're doing that thing that is sort of like I'm a victim or nobody does what they're supposed to do, and recognize that you're doing it and go, wait a second, I'm the only one that's here to save me. No one else is going to save me from this problem.
Yes, I love it. Jeff, thank you so much. You're becoming a series regular now, I think.
I always love chatting with you.
It is mutual, and I know our audience loves you too. You have one of my highest rated episodes, but I already know that you pack a lot of wisdom and value in everything that you share. So I want people to be able to connect with you and get all of your great coaching. Where can they find you online, Jeff?
Sure, a couple different places, but maybe the easiest would be you can find me on LinkedIn under Jeff Siegel. You will be able to tell it's me because I'm talking about middle management stuff and so forth. Um, or you can go to jeffsiegel.com, which is my author site that talks all about speaking, coaching, all the others, training and so forth that I do. And I guess I should give a big shout out to my business partner, Kim Allen, who is amazing. And the two of us have recently co-founded a collaboration called SALT Perspective, which stands for Siegel Allen Leadership Transformation. And the perspective we've already talked about. So saltperspective.com. So those are a number of places where you can find me.
Have all those links. That's wonderful. I think, you have some wonderful webinars that you
Yep.
both host, is that right?
Absolutely. Yes, we have a Salt Perspective YouTube channel, so you can go onto YouTube, and we've done 2 webinars recently. One was for job seekers, and the other one was about difficult conversations.
All
And
important.
more to come. We're doing them at least once a month or maybe more.
So exciting. Well, we'll have all that below. Everybody can go reach out to you. I highly recommend everybody get a copy of your book, Jeff, because it's so helpful. It's such great reminders. I think we all need these reminders, whether we've learned it before, or we're experiencing nuances of our leadership practice today. So thank you for your time. Thank you for our audience. We'll catch you on the next episode of Bad Bosses, Great Leaders, the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much.